I'm Ellen Ermer, and Manny Velosa is also on. We are co-chairs for the LEDA webinar series, but we have the opportunity in the next several months to also offer this special webinar series by Greg Watson. And I think that you will find this very informative and interesting. So this is the first in a series of 6. This one in particular is called Managing for Operational Efficiency, Understanding Japanese Management, a Tale of Three Gemba, helping you to gain a deeper understanding of the nature of the Japanese approach to continuous improvement as a lean management here in the United States or the West, and clarify maybe some of the confusion about these techniques, how they're applied as a coherent strategic system. Gregory Watson, Dr. Gregory Watson has just an astounding amount of experience, education, and background. I am probably not going to be able to speak to all of it, but he has spent a lot of time working with Japanese quality leaders for many, many years and applying these techniques and better understanding the approach from the Japanese perspective. So we look forward to his knowledge, sharing his knowledge, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions. But as with many of these webinars, most of these webinars, it is listen-only mode. So please post your questions in the box, dialog box, and I will be presenting them to Dr. Watson at the end of this so that he can answer those. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Greg Watson. Welcome, and thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you, Ellen. It's a pleasure to come and talk to the Lean Enterprise Division. I remember when I was president of ASQ, we basically signed the first charter to make this group, I think it was called Manufacturing Excellence, or something like that, as a technical committee back in the late 90s. So it's come a long way. What the purpose of this webinar is to do is to describe basically the research that I've done since 2009, when I became the first non-Japanese person to receive a Deming Medal from the Union of Japanese Scientists and Engineers. When I received it, Dr. Noriaki Kano, who had recommended me for the medal, told me that my job was to be a bridge to the West and to help translate the real Japanese TQM and quality systems so that the Western people could understand it. First, I had to increase my depth of understanding. I'd known Dr. Kano and Dr. Kaho since 1983, when I met them at Hewlett Packard and had a long experience with them. But I needed to get into a deeper level of understanding to be able to present that. So this series of 6 webinars is basically my fulfillment of my promise to Dr. Kano of how all of these ideas fit together into a system. And I am an industrial engineer and a systems engineer, and so that's a perspective from which I've taken this. I've also been an executive director of quality at Compaq, vice president of quality at Xerox. So it's also from a managerial perspective. So I'm trying to cover basically the whole gamut, if you will, of structure. In this first seminar, we're going to talk about 3 things. The first topic is discovering what I call a 3 Gemba organization. So what we want to do is discover how the operational Gemba, the administrative Gemba, and the governance Gemba drive future direction and contribute to operational execution. So first, we see all organizations operate at 3 levels. No matter what size the organization, how big it is, but we can say there are 3 different levels of abstraction in organizations. So the top level is about delivering shareholder value. And each of these components has a different way. So at the business level, at the enterprise level, we're seeking value. This is the viewpoint of the entire operation of the organization. At the middle level, or the business level, we're seeking a viewpoint of a specific product line or service area. This might be a unit division or a product category, and it's trying to capture the value that's delivered to the markets in those deliverables. At the lowest level, it's the operations level. And the viewpoint here is a discrete business organization structure, an R&D center, manufacturing factory, sales office, and so forth. and their job is actually producing value. So value is produced at the lowest level of the organization. It's captured and delivered to markets at the middle organization. And then it's seeking value in terms of financial value for shareholders and society at the enterprise level of the organization. And each of these levels delivers value in a different way. So at the top level, they focus on planning, strategy, financial horizons that deal with long-term visions and strategic focus. At the middle level, the focus is on serving customer markets, making decisions basically within an annual business cycle targeted towards specific customers and trade activities. At the operational level, the focus is on executing the daily work processes and improving those processes based primarily on the internal customer in the organization. The second is the external customer in the market. And the highest level, the enterprise level, is the customer who is outside the organization, either the ownership customers or those who are in society at large. Each level has its own objectives in what they're doing to achieve this. And so we're going to focus throughout these sessions on the different levels. Basically, we're starting today by presenting the system. And we see that these levels have distinct responsibilities. So senior managers in the executive level are emphasizing the organization's mission in the short term and the strength and achieving strength to gain the long-term vision for where the strategic direction or intent would like to go. That's the organization's purpose. The middle manager is operating that mission and focusing on coordination of the resources that are provided to it by senior management, and how do we achieve the short-term objectives of the organization. So they are then completing special projects that assure the long-term vision is delivered over a period of time. Operational management is focusing on the daily routine and identifying the opportunities for continual improvement of efficiency to obtain the targeted levels of effectiveness that fulfill the promise of senior management to the organization's shareholders and stakeholders. We can see these three levels are occurring in different ways. In this graphic I created in a 1994 book I wrote called Business Systems Engineering. And I've used this for explaining how organizations work. At the executive level or the enterprise level, we see that they have to understand a scenario of options. They're balancing a world of facts that they gather from the outside of the organization and a world of possibilities. So these are the things that are creating, if you will, variation in the way that their plans, which are based on data, are occurring. And management has to consider, how do these two combine into a series of different types of scenarios, and what can we do with those relative to the critical assumptions we're making about our business purpose, the future direction, and what are the potential discontinuities we see that could upset the facts that we know based on the possibilities we can imply. And from this, we create a business case. So the business case is based on that set of data, plus the values or the culture of the organization, and the vision about where is the long-term direction to achieve this strength over the long term. And these business cases are deployed then into the second tier, the business level. And so the business units get a strategic plan. And we see that they have to do for their business this SWOT type of analysis, evaluate strength, weakness, opportunities, threats. And then they have a series of different implementation plans that support this by, if you will, cross-functional resources from quality, capital investments, information systems, and human resources. They have to deliver business imperatives, the things that management leadership says must change, and they also have to satisfy performance indicators. So this is the box for those of you who love Six Sigma, where we convert Y and create the Y, and it's driven down into the function of X at the operations level. Above this, what we see is the consolidation of Ys into a financial reporting system. So this is the level where we have to operationalize things. Then this is brought down, there might be a 3 to 5 year strategic plan or some sort of thing, and then it's brought into an annual plan. And the annual plan is aligned with budgets, and so that's saying how we're going to spend it, an implementation plan of how we're going to change these strategic projects, and then that goes into the daily business management. So there we're doing problem solving, process management and project management to implement change. And then we have a review cycle, which goes through a diagnostic analysis and a feedback. Corrective preventive actions then are what happens when we start seeing issues in the review, and all reviews are happening at 3 levels. There's a self-assessment done in the workplace by individual work people and the management and the teams. There's an operational review, which is happening on a typically like a monthly and quarterly basis to fit financial requirements. And then there's this thing called a presidential review. That is the review that happens when the executive in charge of the organization is needing to get involved because things are so broken, it requires exceptional resources and exceptional attention to detail. So what we see is as we look at this organization, Gemba 1 is the management system. Gemba 2 is the leadership system. Gemba 1 is asking questions like where and how do we do things. That's about daily management. The Gemba 2 is trying to plan. It's saying, what do we do? Why do we do it? And that's about developing strategy. So these are the questions that we need to ask to achieve results. And the results are measured by how much. However, the how much measures are different at the Gemba 1 level, this management system level, and at the administrative level or the leadership level in Gemba 2. So we have the Gemba 2, it's goal directed about profitability. It's measured in monetary terms. At the Gemba 1 level, it's target achieving, it's productivity based, and it's measured in operational units flowing through the system. And so we see that there has to be some sort of strategic dialogue between these. The leadership is responsible for creating the vision, transforming it into a mission that the Gemba 1 organization can accomplish. And so there's got to be a strategic dialogue between them that can both shape the mission so it achieves the vision, and also assure that the performance is actually making the direction improvements that drive towards achievement of the targets that are reflected in the vision. So this is effective communication, active listening, are essential ingredients to build this sort of participative management system where we can have the strategic dialogue occurring. Now, we see there's a mental model of leadership through quality. It came from Dr. Duran. He called it Big Q, Little Q. When we talk about Big Q, we're talking about the process of managing for quality, which Duran said. So there's 2 components to that. There's a process. The items that are in black here are all process considerations. And then there's the content of strategy. Most organizations, when they have an executive in charge of strategy, basically only fulfill the red block. That is, we're only doing the things that create strategy, objectives, projects, develop project, new markets, and then we have resource allocation and align the company to do that in terms of projects. All the rest of this is done in a hodgepodge of organizations. And this is probably one of the problems about Big Q not existing at the executive level or at this business level in the organization. So we see a strategy is given without the background. So collectively, these are the things that I would call strategic quality, not just Big Q, but calling it strategic quality. When we take a look at this dialogue happening, we see that we're actually integrating these things into the operational system in Gemba 1. This is the daily management system. So strategic quality is introducing change into the system for daily management, which is the operational quality system. And this is what most people think of when they talk about quality management. And so we have 8 different components in terms of this area that we're driving it. So this organizational structure creates integration across the business operational level. Now, Taiichi Ono said that in his book, Workplace Management, there are 2 Gembas. One is productive and the other is operational. And he said, when I say Gemba, it's not just a production workspace, but it's also the office or any workspace. I have spoken about the Gemba, but you can view office work the same as the production work where we make things. You can have the Gemba philosophy for administrative work by identifying your administrative Gemba. So Taiichi Ono identified 2 unique Gemba, but this was based on his understanding from Duran in 1964 when Duran gave his lectures in Japan on breakthrough management and introduced this concept of Big Q, Little Q. And he was trying to realize that how does it actually work in an organization? Now, what we see in Gemba are visible and invisible Gemba. So in the tangible Gemba, this is where workers are producing value. It's focused on managing flow of work and observational data. This workers' language is physical. So in Gemba 1, we see this. It's ordinary language of work. It's described by how things move. It's about how we actually take actions to change them. So it's more about the performance of units rather than financial measurement systems. Gemba 2 are about thought processes, defining and coordinating work. It's focused on managing the flow of resources and information. So the management's language is monetary. That's the business language. So since it's not always clear how to count money in the real world, this language is summarized using averages. So it doesn't really directly relate to work that's being done. So business controls establish limits and the desired range for operations in terms of both time, that's our schedule we have for doing things or deadlines, and money or the budget that we're assigned of the resources we get to be able to affect those types of changes. Now, if we look at this Gemba as a tiered organization, we see basically there's a number of different organizations that are affected in these levels. And actually, I want to break out supervisory as a little different from the Gemba 1. So Gemba 1 actually includes the operational folks plus the supervisory folks. And this is the functional structure management. Gemba 2 includes the supervisor as well as business and executives. And so as we start looking at this, we're going to start seeing that Gemba 1 operates in a tactical plan to create discipline. Gemba 2 quality is operating as a strategic enabler of long-term sustained performance. So we see in this, everyone has a job to do that creates quality. However, everyone's job contributes to quality in a different way. We're not doing the same things. So the idea behind Gemba, this is shared with me by Glenn Mazur, who is the translator of the works by Dr. Akaho, and he also translated many of the research papers that were used by the Global QPC Research Committee between 1994 and 1984 and 1991. And he told me that this basically is reflecting what Aristotle said, that excellence is the result of a habit. Doing routine work in the best possible way consistently over time. That happens in the Gemba. And if we dissect the term Gemba, which is a Romaji term, and find it in the kanji, we see this term that's there in the black. And if I use the 5W1H questions, we can describe what is the meaning behind that Gemba term. So if we say what happened, it was a survey, a detailed scrutiny of the workplace. Who was there? It was the king. It's an executive function. And when did it happen? At sunset, at the end of a working period. Where did it happen? At the point where the real work was being accomplished. Why did it happen? To understand the real thing, the real facts. And how did it happen? It was a personal activity by the king to go and see what was happening. And the final result that's actually in these, and the king sees reality, and the Chinese character for that actually implies pigsty. So he sees the workplace and all of its mess. So we're constantly seeking opportunities to improve, and that is a responsibility of the executive function. That was actually something that Henri Fayol said in his early book in 1916, where he talked about general and industrial management, that the executive's purpose was, the executive charge purpose was to have a constant intent to pursue improvement in all areas of the organization, at all levels of the organization. And so we see we can characterize actually what are the quality characteristics in these two levels. And we see that they're actually very different as we go through this list. Now, you'll be able to see this in a PDF of the materials a little bit better, and I can't talk about all of them because we only have basically an hour or so to do this, and I've got a couple more of these very graphical things. But this was actually published in an article in the Journal of Quality and Participation to describe this back in 2018 or 2019. And we see the responsibilities in Gemba 1 are about the responsibilities of the worker, doing their own work, expanding work to a scope to conduct work in adjacent areas so they learn more about the flow of activities and how to work in those activities, performing work according to standard requirements or the check sheets, checking the quality of the incoming work and their own work deliverables, improving efficiency of their own work, increasing the integration of their work within that performance system, and suggesting system level improvements that could increase the effectiveness of the work processes beyond the scope of their own activities. So their job is basically twofold: do work and improve work. And we take a look at the supervised Gemba, Gemba 2, their job is to document the processes of standard work for flow and failure risk, train the workers, monitor the process for flow efficiency, task performance, check the worker performance, facilitate problem-solving teams, assure workflow balance and equity in operator tasking, solicit task improvement ideas from workers, conduct small-scale experiments to improve process performance, recommend system-level performance to management, and participate in system-level improvement projects. So their job is train workers and manage the flow. Now, if we start taking a look at this, there are some operating characteristics of each of these in addition to the quality characteristics. And so we see that we can further define these. So in Gemba 1, they're focusing on do act. Their primary wastes are muda and mura. So it's work discipline and flow waste. At the next level, the primary wastes are muri, bad decision making, and mura, bad flow. And so we see that there are different time frames, different primary measures that they have. Microeconomic versus macroeconomic in terms of concerns. Gemba 1 is focused on special cause variation. Gemba 2 is focused on common cause variation. And so we start seeing that each of these has a different fulfillment in terms of how it's actually operating together. Now, when we look at these three levels of the organization, we see that management leadership is required. And this is like the check step in standardized do check act or plan do check act, or the study step in Deming's transformation process, plan do study act. Those are not competing models. And so we see senior management should spend most of their time on reflective leadership, dealing with the future and creating that future. They should have some in reflective action, where they actually are doing things, and some in action management, or the routine work of the organization. Middle management is split 50-50 between reflective leadership and reflective action, but the majority of their work, the other 50%, is on action management, doing jobs. Frontline has a little bit on reflective action, that's the check step in their process, and then a lot on basically action management. So that's about maybe an 80-20 split for the organizations. So the job here is think ahead, but plan in depth. And we start seeing that when we take a look at this process versus function, what's the difference? So we see there are distinctions in responsibilities and accountabilities for process owners and functional managers. Basically, the functional manager manages the resource flow and develops competence in people, including career planning, budgeting, and their KPI is cost. The process owner is managing process flow. They develop capability of the system, and they're focused on the integration of that work, and they're worried about performance outcomes, and their primary measure is related to flow. It's like throughput, and that's responding not to shareholders, but to customer demand. So there are two different flows and two different ways to go for managing the priorities of work. And if we look at this model now as a 3 Gemba model, we start seeing that strategic change is dealing with the top half of the model. And then we have this internal, how do we work inside the organization? And is that different from outside? So comprehensive change is integrated across that whole organization. So engaging every person in terms of creating quality in this type of organizational structure is essential. And we start seeing that the way that they're engaged is different. So in Gemba 1, they're looking at incremental continual improvement. Gemba 2 is looking at breakthrough projects. Gemba 3 is looking at transformation projects. And when you put all of that together in one overall view of the organization from the outside, we see the organization constantly in a state of change that we would call continuous improvement. But when we actually look in Gemba 1, it's continual improvement. So there's a very big difference in those. So first, we have to identify the problem domain. Second, discover its solution space. Third, formulate a project aimed at delivering this solution. And that's what we're going to be doing in different levels of this organization. So this transformation is leader emphasis at the Gemba 3 level. That's about the governance level. The business level is system level. That's about breakthrough. The deliverable level emphasis is on the work process or continual improvement. So managers improve processes, leaders improve systems. So this is about how we manage a portfolio of improvement actions across the organization. They're on different planning horizons, and they're at different scopes and different level of detail. So as we start taking a look at these, we can start seeing Gemba 1 is about the workers, productivity, how they perform, operate, flow efficiency, quality efficiency, getting it right the first time. Gemba 2 is about customers, work priority, supervision and management of that work. And they focus not on flow, but productivity, the deliverables. And then we see that Gemba 3 is about the owners of the organization. And here the concern is profitability. It's a command and control function about resource efficiency. So together, the system of change projects appears from an external perspective as continuous improvement. When we look inside, each level of that organization has a unique responsibility in its contribution for improvement. So if we look at Gemba 3, we see it's actually studying and evaluate the business system implications from the externalities. It's creating the strategic direction. It's crafting a culture that creates collaboration, cooperation, and so forth. So it's dealing with setting the strategy and providing the resources. And we look at this, we see in this Japanese term, Genichi Gembutsu, it means go see for yourself. Go to the real place in the Gemba, see the actual entity, the real thing, Gembutsu. Get the real facts, Genjutsu. And those three gens, notice, all have the same first character here. So these are these red characters here. And they are the way that this Genichi Gembutsu works. This is the process of going. So when you talk about a Gemba walk, those are the three things that are being happening. However, when you go and you start seeing things differently, then what you want to do is understand what is that process. So then we start seeing the objective of this is to get the real reason and to get real control. So those are the outcomes of this Genichi Gembutsu. And so we want to have all of those coming together in the system. So Kaizen is the incremental act of making these things continually better by going and looking and then finding the real reason and the real control for those unexpected things that are happening. Now, Taiichi Ohno in Workplace Management says, if you're out there observing the Gemba, do something for them. If you do, workers will think he's watching us, but he comes up with some good ideas. That way, when the workers see you, they'll look forward to your help again. And as a result, they'll begin telling you what makes the work hard to do and ask you to think of ways to help them make it better. And he also said, when you enter the factory, you should walk in a way that takes you hours to go 100 meters. So a Gemba walk is not a 10-minute exercise, 15-minute exercise. It should be like a half-day exercise. If it takes you no time at all to go 100 meters, that means no one is relying on you. So the gift of management that you have to give to workers are decision rights. In other words, here is the responsibility to do something. You can make this decision here, and resources that are not in their budget, that go beyond their budget. And so we see that each of these three levels of the organization is really concentrating differently. Senior executives on agility, policy, or the strategy. The type of waste is Morty, that's a Hoshin Kanri system. Cross-functional managers, harmony in flow. They worry about Mura type of waste, and they can have Kaizen Kanri systems and Hinshitsu, which is quality control. Frontline workers have discipline, they're focusing on perfection and getting rid of Muda, and that's Nichijo Kanri and Hinshitsu Kanri, that's daily management and quality control. And so each of these is trying to deal with things in a different way. So the workers are looking at standard work and reducing the 7 wastes. Managers improving through experiments and streamlining the 7 flows. Executives directing strategic change and assuring long-term financial results. So we see Kaizen is this incremental act, making things continually better and engaging all people as active participants, each of them in their own job to contribute to the improvement of the performance as a system. So how deeply have we really learned about the way we work? There's a story that Dr. Kano tells that I think helps to illustrate pretty much how this really operates. And he said that what we see is that he called this fourth generation sushi. And he says first generation sushi was prepared by a Japanese chef in Japan. Second generation sushi was prepared by a Japanese chef in America, like at Nobu in some of the major cities, like in Los Angeles. Third generation sushi was prepared by a American chef in America. Fourth generation sushi is prepared by an American chef in Japan, but using beef instead of fish. So first you have to seek to understand, then you can adapt. So don't copy, adapt. Don't adopt, as Deming said. So that's the end of the first thing. That identifies these three levels of Gemba. And what we see, each of them is understanding a different way of working. So Gemba 1 has SDCA, Gemba 2 is basically looking at PDCA, and Gemba 3, PDSA cycles. And holistically, they combine to create a simultaneously continuous improvement of quality and cost. So if we take a look at this, in collaborative planning, we have three different components. We have strategic direction, feeding change management as projects, and that then changes what happens in daily management. So moving the organization's aim onto a target that creates the vision and keeping it there. So the requirement to do this is an integrated system for managing value produced work. And we take a look at this and we start seeing, we understand these things typically in the West, strategic direction as like business excellence, change management can be process improvement projects or Lean Six Sigma, and daily management is about business controls or maybe quality management systems. And we see each of those has a different objective. Identifying opportunities for change and strategy, taking the projects into completion in the change management, sustaining the gains, documenting measure process, and delivering value in daily management. And this Japanese system operates basically on top of this. So Hoshin Kanri is their system for strategic direction setting. Kaizen Kanri is what you do for an individual project. And then Nichijo Kanri is a deliverable in daily management. And Hinshitsu Kanri is, Hinshitsu means quality basically, and Kanri means management system. So that is the quality management system that is the control function for the business operations as well as for the project change. Now we look at this at a top level, and when you get the PDF files, by the way, you'll see that there's multiple slides getting to this time. But we see there's three different Gembas. So Gemba 1 is about the standardized do, check, act cycle. This is identified in the Japanese standards of the Japanese Society for Quality Control. Then the PDCA cycle is actually happening in Gemba 1, but in Gemba 2, it's now operating uniquely beyond just support of individual projects. And it's actually thinking about how do we do things on a broader scale. Gemba 3 is Plan, Do, Study, Act. And notice that the study is actually overlapping the check steps of Gemba 1. And that check step is required because you have to check to make sure we're meeting the targets for requirements of the customer, or also check that we're actually following standard work. The check step in Plan to Check Act is checking to see, is this change ready for implementation? Is it stabilized and uncontrolled, and then ready for integration into daily management? But Plan to Study Act changes the horizon. When Deming talked about this, he talked about in the new economics, and he talked about in a chapter that is dealing with executive transformation of organizations. He was talking about what I'm calling Gemba 3. And so these three cycles of improvement really define overlapping action reinforcement program. So they're not really independent. They all have to work together. And when they're coordinated in an integrated system, we start seeing that the planning process for that is what we call Hoshin Kanri and Nichijo Kanri, and the integration of the two together. And if we take a different look at this, we see that this compliance level of the system, this is Gemba 1, that's our quality system. It's an operational linkage. This Gemba 3 is about business excellence, if you will, and it's the aspiration level, what we'd like to do. And so it's knit together by a planning process where we can have like Lean Six Sigma projects that we do benchmarks to find out how good we are outside, and we do self-assessment to do how good we're actually performing inside the organization. And the sequence of projects takes us from that basic level to the strategic level in terms of performance. So this is what we mean by an integrated quality management system, all three levels working together in harmony. Now, last topic is about the Toyota management system. This is talking about cross-functionality of that system. And Taiichi Ohno said, people need to follow the standards. Insufficient standardization and rationalization creates muda, inconsistency, mora, and unreasonableness, mori, in work procedures and work hours that will eventually lead to defective projects. So Taiichi Ohno said, lowly work instructions manage the change processes at Toyota. It's not the strategy thinking at the top, it's how you transform that into the work done in that bottom part of the process. So in perhaps the best English version paper I've seen, we have Stephen Spear talking about how work is done. So the first rule of the DNA is basically defining the daily management system. The second is about clear communication channels. The third is about managing the flow of activities. And the fourth is about structured team problem solving. So all of those are elements that are included, if you will, in the DNA of how Toyota operates. And in 2015, I had an opportunity to spend some time with Dr. Sorichiro Toyota, and I interviewed him in Tokyo. And I asked him that in 1963, he was a quality executive for Toyota Motor Company, and he started, if you will, the first cross-functional steering committee based on a recommendation about business integration that actually came from Dr. Duran. And he says, I asked him, you know, how Taiichi Ohno was. He says, Taiichi Ohno was very difficult. He said we had to have Toyota production system deployed in all areas of our business. I replied, Dami Taiichi, but that means no, a very severe way to say it. Yes, we must have Toyota production system in production, but throughout all business areas, we must develop a Toyota management system. And so after that, in 2017, I mentioned to him that nobody knows what the Toyota management system is. They only know this. And so to avoid confusion, they should start communicating this. So in 2017 in Sochi, Russia, Toshio Horikiri talked about the Toyota management system. And he talked about how there's a design system that feeds a production system that feeds a sales system. But he didn't really give much detail below that. And what we start seeing is that we've seen lots of people talk about the house of the Toyota production system, just in time, respect for humanity, Jidoka, standardized work is the foundation of this whole system. But there's actually been some misunderstanding in this. So this respect for humanity was originally, when the first time this came out, called respect for individuals. And the kanji character in the middle here changes this from an individual person respect to respect for humanity, or the collective value of people working in the system. And the objective is to achieve harmony, or wa, which is here. It means harmony, peace, or balance between people. So the role of leadership in the system is to delegate decision rights and capacity to act, and facilitate the engagement of workers in their progress as they move along their improvement journey. So that's the supervisor's responsibility, to enable, encourage workers so they can come to be enthusiastic participants in the process. Toyota's management system manages two parallel efforts. One is waste reduction through quality assurance, and the other is cost reduction through cost management. And when you get to the factory floor, cycle time is a proxy measure for both product quality and production cost. So if we have a product quality problem, cycle time goes up. If I have a safety problem, cycle time goes up. If I have a cost, have any sort of problem in terms of cost, it's because it's spending too much time to meet the work beyond the standard cost. So on the production floor, they only worry about two measures in real time. One is the cycle time of the work relative to talk time, and the other is the number of units produced so far on the shift compared to the target. And when we look at Toyota's management system, we see they have the executive level dealing with business policy, and that comes down to annual policy, and these goals are applied then to the Toyota production system through the functions. So in the factory, all of the functions are organized together. I was in a Toyota factory north of Tokyo one time, and I had a group of people with me, and one of the people asked the factory manager, how do you participate in Hoshin? And he says, what's Hoshin? And then the person who was with us from corporate quality says, at the factory, they get Hoshin objectives as an action plan. And they don't really participate in all elements of Hoshin, we have monitoring systems that allow us to understand how they're working, and we have our Gemba introductions to understand how they actually collaborate together. And then the factory manager says, it's a test guy. I understand. Action plan. Yes, we do action plan to change daily management. And so this is the thing, is we look at this Toyota system, it's actually kind of a circle. And so we see a product concept going into product planning, design evaluation, production concept. So now we're moving from design into production. We have a production process designing the Toyota production system, and we move into sales. So we develop the sales concept, we have sales designing the process, and then we build those customer relationships. So this component here is a Toyota design system, the Toyota production system, and the Toyota sales system in some more detail. And together they formulate the Toyota management system. So when we start looking at this, workplace vitalization is what Toyota does. And this is the real management of the workplace. This is the Gemba Conry, the workplace management system. And it's embedded into the TMS deployment, or the Toyota management system deployment. So each worker creates their own unique ideas. And TMS characteristics make it fit for continual Kaizen efforts. So they visualize the action, creating a better workplace, creating value, emphasizing a Kaizen mindset. And all their improvement teams are called Jisuken, which means a second set of eyes for quality improvement and problem solving. They emphasize work quality, statistical thinking, and process owner. This is called J Kotai Konketsu, which means taking ownership for your work. And then finally, they're creating profits. So they create profit and increase productivity. So Toyota senior management revitalizes this management system once about every decade. And so they try to create stability in not only the workplace through standards, but also in management system. And we see these team-based alternatives and development. So they develop these analytical methods, Jisuken teams. Jisu Kanri is how you do work discipline and personal development of individuals. They have education and training. They have J Kotai Konketsu, which is a process for collaboration and having ownership. As you see here, it's even in the office space. And then they have key performance targets, KPTs, not KPIs. And then they have reflection, Hansei, which is the check and the study steps. So Shinichi Sakachi, who's the Toyota board responsible, said, everyone is trained on the job in the use of statistical methods. It is mandatory. So even though people have said statistics don't matter in lean, in Toyota, it's mandatory for everyone in the company. And they're trained in the context of the work that they're doing just for the statistics they need to get their job done. And here is a more detailed way of looking at this Toyota production system or Toyota management system. I don't really have time to go into it, but all of those elements of the Toyota management system are integrated as a flow to realize how new products are prepared, and car product lines flow in this process cycle. Now, it's interesting that since 2015, today, the Toyota Engineering Company, which Horikiri-san was president of in 2015, now has an organization called the Toyota Management Institute. And it is offering training in the Toyota management system in Tokyo and Nagoya through the Asian Overseas Training System Services, the AOTS. And so it's at a reasonable cost. There's you pay for your own travel, but the local costs are very reasonable. Now, what I want to do is now have a summary. And Taiichi Yano said, the key to the Toyota way and what makes Toyota stand out is not any of the individual elements. So it's not choosing a tool here or a tool there. That's tool head thinking. He says, what is important is having all the elements together as a system. It must be practiced every day in a very consistent manner, not in spurts. He didn't believe in Kaizen blitzes. He believed in Kaizen happening every day, everywhere. He didn't believe in doing a certain number of Kaizens in a month. He believed everybody should be constantly on the lookout for small improvements. So, summary of today's lesson. We've gone through three things. To establish an understanding of this 3 Gemba management system, through the operational Gemba, administrative, and governance Gemba for driving future direction and contributing to operational execution. We've learned a little bit about SDCA, PDCA, and PDSA cycles and how they operate together in a collaborative management system to holistically assure simultaneously management of quality and cost. And then we've seen how this Toyota management system operates cross-functionally through integration of the three components: the Toyota production system with the Toyota sales system and the Toyota design system. So the next step in this series of 6 lectures will be a deep dive to take a look at how does this SDA cycle get established and how does it operate. And here you'll see some familiar tools start showing up and some unfamiliar ones that help the Japanese to define how do we create that daily management. We don't have a whole lot of time for questions, but I'm certainly open to take some.
All right.
Ellen, do you have some?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Watson. We do have a couple questions here, and I actually have one that I'd like to start with. And it speaks more, I guess I wonder if you can speak a little bit to the Japanese culture and how it helps, I think, to support, drive, and influence this way of addressing quality. I think that's some of the challenges that we often see, especially in the United States.
Okay, I think there are 3 cultural elements in Japan that give them an advantage. The first is a deep sense of duty and respect, particularly for elders or for people in authority. And so that's one very strong component. The second one is this idea of everyone is valued for something. And as a result of that, they all have their duty to fulfill in a collaborative way. So it's not about the individual, it's about collectivism. And decisions are made in a form of consensus. Or how do we get everybody talking together? Very much like we see in the Swedish culture, actually, in Europe. And the third component is this desire to follow a disciplined approach. And I think you can see this in some of the cultural components, like in how the tea ceremony is conducted. And there are many deliberate motions that you have to go through to conduct a proper tea ceremony. So it's not just pouring a bunch of hot water in a cup and swigging it down. It's about all of those individual motions. And in the motions, there is a demonstration of respect and welcoming for an individual into your home. And so we see that culture. So Japan has another advantage. It's monolithic. 90+% of the Japanese are Japanese. They live a Shinto national culture. 60% of Japanese are Buddhists, so they have many common things streaming through their thinking process, their acting process. This definitely helps them. However, that does not constrain these systems from going outside of Japan. So when Toyota takes their factory outside of Japan, like when they brought it to Kentucky, can't get much further away from Japan than Kentucky, quite frankly. And so as they brought it there, what they did was they brought the flavor of it there and they allowed them to change it. The first overseas factory was at the new United Motors Works in Fremont, California. And I was located about maybe 20 miles from there at Hewlett Packard headquarters. And because of the Japanese system and we were operating a Japanese quality system, we had a lot of sharing with them. And what Toyota did was they allowed the United Auto Workers Union, who had many of the employees there, to actually deal with some of the system. There were some things that were not negotiable, and then many things were. And so they opened it up to this idea of participative management, that people would take ownership when they have the ability and authority to make decisions about the quality of their own work and how they do those tasks.
All right, thank you. Very interesting. One of the first questions posted, I think, if I understand this question correctly, it is in regards to how this approach can be appreciated by academic and research institutions. This particular individual Googled around and didn't seem to find much in regards to that.
Well, I think the one unique thing that I've done since 2009 is when I have a kanji term, I vet the term and its translation with a panel of a half a dozen Japanese thought leaders in quality. And so these are not translations I make or that I've carried over from what people see in open press. And so that I think is one of the things. The other thing is that I try to get to the etymology. What are the original, if it's a kanji term, that's our ancient terms. Those actually came from a language that came out of China. And so I go back to what were the original meanings in the Chinese. And so, for instance, if you talk about work, there's two different characters for work. One which is just work and one which is human work. And the difference is they have the picture of a man added to the character. We talk about human work. And so to do that sort of thing, I don't really see that done. There's a few sites that have these, but I'm not really clear that they've actually had their translations vetted. Some I've seen are reasonably good. ASQ's dictionary is horrible, for Japanese terms. And I think that there are many improvements that need to be done, and that'll be something I start taking on after I finish this series of lectures.
Great, thank you. This next one is, I'm not sure. Please comment on the current teaching of starting with mission to develop vision versus starting with vision to develop mission.
Japan does not do either.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That's a Western thing. Japan starts with organizational purpose. That's neither vision nor mission. So mission is what you do to fulfill purpose. The vision is where you're going with purpose. And I think this is also something interesting that goes along with what Russ Akoff said and what Peter Drucker said, and even what Deming said. You have to first have the aim of the organization. And this is the why am I here question. What are we trying to accomplish? Why did we organize this business? And every business that's organized and given a charter as a small business or with a business license, corporate license, has to have a reason for being that's in its charter of papers filed with the government. And that's why it exists. And we see in vision and mission, there's no linkage back to the legal reason for a business. And so those are not the starting places in a Japanese company. The reason for being in a Japanese company is one thing. I asked Dr. Toyota about this, and he said, I told him that you should really be teaching these principles to the Western audiences. And he said, no, we make cars. That was his purpose. We make cars. When his father, Kichiro Toyota, founded it, it was because his father, Sakichi Toyota, said, go make cars. And so now, 100 years later, we make cars was the answer. So I think that's a consistency.
Interesting. Another question. Didn't Shingo object to SVC as a temple?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Now, you have to remember, Shingo was objecting to XBAR R charts, and particularly the way they were taught at that time for manual data collection of 25 sets of 5 observations with time space between them, which is horrible. Okay, that is obsolete. One should never use XBAR R or XBAR S charts. They were obsoleted by individual charts or individual moving average charts where you can take a look at everything. And the reason that Shingo objected was twofold. One is that you're producing a problem for however time it takes to gather 25 independent samples and make sure that each of the samples is randomly selected. And also, in addition to that, what you're actually doing is you're increasing cost in your system. And so what the IMR chart does is it immediately shows you how fast you are actually away from the process. And Shingo's zero QC concept actually does a similar type of thing as an IMR chart. So when I teach statistics, and I have been doing this for a long time, I don't even teach IMR charts anymore. Soren Biscard, who is one of the, passed away several years back, 20 years back, he was one of my best friends and perhaps one of the leading statisticians in the late second half of the last century. He basically and I were working on an article when he died that's saying, ignore the statistical control charts, that they're obsolete. That what they do is they focus on the average and they dampen your understanding of variation. Not what you want to do when observing real world processes.
I'm not, there's a comment here that says Mr. Onio quoted, "Without a standard, there is no improvements." What kind of
Yep.
standards is he talking about?
Okay, well, he talked about that you can't have any basis for improving if you don't have a starting point. But he also said in that same paragraph in his work, he said, don't make the first standard so difficult people can't follow it, making it easy so they can find areas to improve and build the habit of Kaizen, so that they build the habit of continual improvement. And then you reinforce the idea of workers have the right to make those improvements happen. Duran said the same type of thing, that you have to have a standard from which to manage change. And so I think that is the basis. Now, it's not a standard like ISO 9000. That's a standard with which I call with a big S. It's a standard with a little s. It's a work instruction, if you will, or some way of telling the worker this is how you do this job as a process step.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. No questions, unless anybody posts something in the next minute. I appreciate your time. This has been very interesting. And please do not, please remember that this is the first in a series of 6. And the second webinar will be in April. You can sign up for that through my ASQ. And again, thank you very much, Dr. Watson, and we look forward to hearing from you again.
My pleasure, Ellen. And are you going to post a PDF of the materials that people can download?
Sure, we can do that.
People are asking for copies of the slides.
Yep.
Okay, I will send you a copy of the final edited ones as a PDF. And also, if anybody writes me to my email address, which is here, I'll also send a PDF. There are some people who've been doing that with the series I've been doing in quality management.
Okay, great. And also there will be, there has been a recording of this, and that will be posted on the LED YouTube, just like the regular webinars. So thank you again for your time, and everyone have a great rest of your day or evening,
My pleasure.
depending on where you're at.
Next month.